Twitter Files 6 Supplemental Edition. Matt Taibbi came out and released a little bit more because we always want to go a little bit further. You remember Twitter Files 6 was talking about the FBI and sort of their level of involvement with Twitter and how it was essentially a subsidiary of Twitter. The FBI almost was like a kind of like they were the same company, so to speak, because Twitter was doing moderation, but the FBI was doing even more moderation, and they were suggesting moderation removals, and Twitter was just saying, no problem, happy to do that. We love working for you. But something else came out in Twitter Files 6, and it's more about this fellow right here. You'll see his name is Elvis Chan, and so when we jump into the supplemental, Matt Taibbi released more. December 18th, the Twitter Files supplemental, a supplemental thread to Twitter Files 6, which dropped previously. Taibbi says that in July of 2020, San Francisco FBI agent Elvis Chan, the guy that we just showed you, he tells a Twitter executive, Yoel Roth, to expect written questions from a very special entity called the Foreign Influence Task Force, the FITF, the FITF, the interagency group that deals with cyber threats. Wow, okay. So it sounds like another very big, important group. Remember the FBI, they were posting up command centers and all sorts of stuff, really patting themselves on the back. And in July, we know that there's a very important election coming up. Donald Trump is running for office again. So they go into hyperdrive to make sure that they can protect us against foreign influence like what happened in 2016, because we all know that that would have gone differently had only they stopped those little Russians from meddling. So here's the letter. It goes from Elvis Chan, the guy that we just showed you, this fellow right here. We're going to listen to him in a minute. But he sends a letter over to Yoel Roth. Remember, Yoel, we've talked about, is also somebody who is no longer at Twitter, but was formerly the head of trust and safety. So Elvis, FBI agent, sends a message to Twitter, allegedly a private government employee, private employee, not government. He says, hi, Yoel. I believe FITF, the Foreign Interference Task Force, would like a response ahead of our meeting of the week of August 10th. It can be a written response or we can set up a phone call, whatever is easiest for you. I think you can tell from the nature of the questions that there was quite a bit of discussion within the U.S. intelligence community to get clarifications from your company. Let me know how you would like to proceed. Thanks. Regards, Elvis. Regards, right? Not even a friendly, take care. Not even a friendly thank you, just regards. So what you can see is this is an FBI agent. And last time we talked about this, what constitutes a state actor? Okay, when does Twitter become a state actor? We know the FBI is a state actor because they're employed by the state. It's the government, right? It's the federal government. So when does Twitter become an actual extension of the federal government such that the FBI is now infringing upon our rights by acting or by outsourcing their censorship to Twitter, right? In other words, Twitter is just an extension of the government. Where does that line become crossed? Well, some people might think it's when the entity, right, the company, really doesn't have an opportunity to say no. And does this sound like they have the opportunity to say no? I believe our agency, FITF, would like a response ahead of our meeting. It's not, would you provide one? Can you please send one over? It's, we want this. You can do it one of two ways, phone call or in writing, whatever's easiest for you, but there's no option to not give us a response. I think you can tell from the nature of the questions that there was quite a bit of discussion in the intelligence community to get clarifications from you because we didn't like what we hear. And when we don't like what we hear, we need clarifications. Let me know what you want to do. All right. So no, this is not like a friendly meeting. This is a boss communicating to an employee. This is Elvis telling Yoel, you better have a written response or give me a phone call because the intelligence community is pretty upset. Looking forward to your response. Now, the questionnaire authors seem displeased with Twitter for implying in a prior industry briefing that you indicated that you had not observed much recent activity from official propaganda actors on your platform. Okay. If we flesh this out a little bit, this is a letter from the FBI that is going over to Twitter. The questionnaire authors seem displeased with Twitter. Okay, this is an FBI letter. Apparently, what Yoel is being asked about, the clarifications, it's regarding a DHS ODNI FBI industry briefing. The briefing goes on. This is what the FBI is upset about. FBI says to Twitter, hey, yo, and Twitter people, they write, during the June meeting, 2020, the same meeting that we just saw the email from, on our election security, the FBI says you indicated, Twitter employees, that you had not observed much recent activity from official propaganda actors on your platform. Okay, this first sentence is saying, dear Twitter, you told us that you didn't see any Russian propaganda or foreign meddling. To make sure we understand the state media online landscape as much as possible. So the FBI, the intelligence community is saying, to make sure you understand, in other words, we hope you would be able to answer some questions about your analysis and conclusions. Okay, it's like, okay, you did a math equation and you came to an answer. We didn't like the answer that you came to, so we'd like to see the work. Show us your work. But this is not a math equation. This is their analysis, and the FBI just didn't like the conclusion. So they basically said, go back to the drawing board. They write, for context, other sources we are aware of, like other social media companies that are smarter than you losers at Twitter, including those that are referenced down here below, right? So they actually put in some footnotes, like a bibliography down here, just so they can reference some sources. They say, for context, other sources linked below indicate that state media actors are prolific users of social media, which seems in contrast to your own analysis as we documented at the time of our discussion. Okay, so this is a nice way of saying your conclusions. This is not even that nice, actually. This is kind of condescending, but it's just telling them directly, we don't like your conclusions. We want to see your work. We have other evidence that shows differently, and we'd like to have a conversation with you about how you came to your outcome. We would appreciate any other information you're willing to provide about your recent conclusions. Here, for example, we'd like to know in what ways and by what measures you see official propaganda actors as less active than other groups. What groups are you comparing the official propaganda actors to? Like, are these people talking about football games or something? Right? Because there's a lot more of them than there are these people. So the FBI wants to say, where's the gap? Because they want big numbers. They want those numbers to be burgeoning through the roofs. FBI says, well, what official propaganda actors did you include? I mean, did you include all those white supremacists? Did you include all the Trump voters? Oh, that's why your numbers are low, because you didn't include all 130 million Trump voters or whatever the numbers are, right? You didn't care to include them, so now it's different. What quantitative metrics do you use to judge the volume of activity on your platform? Can you provide those metrics to us? And what relative weight do you give each metric? And what quantitative measures do you use? And how do you limit the scope of your analysis? Does this sound like the FBI is just sending a friendly letter over to Twitter? No, they don't at all. They sound like they want to know how they're running their whole company because they don't agree with their conclusions. And they're very angry at them for not giving them the answers that they wanted after their June meeting. This is a letter saying, don't disagree with us again, because if you disagree with us again, you're going to get another letter like this and you're going to have all this additional work to do. So the next time we try to force feed you a conclusion, in other words, FBI saying to Twitter, please corroborate that you're under dire threats from Russia, aren't you? The Russians are attacking you every day, aren't they, Jack and Vijaya and Parag, aren't they? Yes, they are. Perfect. That's the right answer. So they cite their references, Oxford Internet Institute, these Oxford people. Where's Jake Sullivan? Is he out there? We have Foreign Policy Research Institute, the Oxford Internet Institute, the Mercator Institute for China Studies, Propaganda Beyond the Great Firewall, and the Wall Street Journal. Russia State drives news, they thrive on Facebook. Okay. They're citing all these other, stupid references because nobody even trusts the FBI. They're like, oh, well, we better just cite Oxford. They're more reputable than we are. Now, one would think this would be good news when Twitter responds and says, we don't have all those threat actors, but the agencies felt otherwise. Chan, Elvis, he underscored this. He said there was quite a bit of discussion within the U.S. intelligence community to get clarifications, and we demand to know how Twitter came to its unpopular conclusion. And they included a bibliography of the sources, including a Wall Street Journal article, because they think that nobody trusts them. They want to convince Twitter. They want to sort of pile on to Twitter and say to Twitter that you guys are just totally boneheads. Even the Wall Street Journal could figure this out. Why couldn't you, knuckleheads? But this is Elvis Chan. Now, Elvis Chan was working there as a special agent, the supervisory special agent out of San Francisco. And here he is talking about the 2018 midterms. So this is taking place in 2017. And so we're jumping back in time a little bit. These meetings that we're reading the emails from are from June 2020. This conversation is from 2017. Let's listen to Elvis
I'm Tom
Chan.
Field, Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. Topic I have today is one of the hottest ones of the year. It's securing the midterm election. I'm very pleased to be speaking with Elvis Chan, Supervisory Special Agent with the FBI in San Francisco. Elvis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Tom.
So as we approach this midterm election, what are
Let me just pull this up over on YouTube. For some reason it's
your
not.
cybersecurity
There it is.
concerns regarding foreign influence?
So there are really two things that I'm personally very concerned about.
Tell us, Elvis.
Kind of looks like a rehash of the 2016 election.
Oh, where nothing happened?
Number one, I'm really worried about more misinformation campaigns.
That didn't do anything?
From the Russian government, perhaps from other foreign state actors.
There we
and then
go.
The second thing is I'm worried that there are data breaches either at private or public organizations that we're not aware of yet, and that information is going to start leaking as the campaign season really picks up.
Now,
Okay,
you're
so
working-
leaky information. Leaky information. Huh. Does that come up in 2020? Oh, yeah. Hunter Biden's leaky laptop. Remember that whole saga?
with social media companies now on this issue. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're working.
Question, you're working with social media.
That start leaking as the campaign season really picks up.
Are you working with
So
social
you're
media?
working with social media companies now on this issue. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're working with lots of different types of companies.
What are the vulnerabilities that you see or concern you?
I think the things that really worry me the most is the more successful a social media company is, the larger they are, the more data that they have. And they have some really smart, competent folks, and they have some really good machine learning and artificial intelligence. But at the end of the day, looking for these cyber threat actors is like looking for a needle in a haystack.
What's the FBI doing to help these organizations to bolster their defenses?
What are you doing?
So specifically with certain social media companies and platforms, we are providing them with classified briefings on the specific threat actors that.
Wow, classified briefings to just private companies? That's weird. Are they all certified? Do they all get special security clearances and all approved with deep dive background checks? I mean, I thought the classified stuff was only for like elected officials and government national security agents. Why are they giving them to Twitter employees if they're not acting as like they are an extension of the government?
May be on their platforms. We're also sharing indicators of compromise, TTPs, tools, tactics, and processes that can help them safeguard their platforms.
So are there things that you want consumers and even other enterprises to know based upon this work you're doing with social media companies now?
Well, I think the thing that I really want the general public to know is that we're on the job, that we're doing what we can to safeguard our next election. But if they see
safeguard the next election for them,
other companies, and people in their own walks of life see something unusual or suspicious, they should feel free to report it to the FBI.
Yeah, if you see somebody making a joke on Twitter about voting on Wednesday, instead of Tuesday, definitely make sure you notify the dozens of FBI agents who are only monitoring Twitter. It's like 80 monitoring Twitter, probably hundreds, thousands of other people. We joke with these jokers that they're out there looking for Where's Waldo and they're building Lego sets, just like the Capitol building Lego set up there. They're also looking for bad jokes on Twitter as well so that they can fortify the elections.
Elections, social media aside, what are you doing now to proactively help organizations to improve their own cybersecurity postures?
So that is probably one of the passions of my life right now, is doing outreach, right? So the FBI, we have a booth at RSA conference, right? We want to do outreach. We want to let people know that we are here for the American public, that we're here to protect people. I do a lot of outreach engagements with ISMG and a lot of other industry parters.
To
just because
infest
we want to let people
the private
know that,
entities.
hey, you have an FBI agent who's here, and you can just bounce ideas off of us or ask us any questions.
And
We're just here. We're just like hanging out with you guys. Very conveniently, you have access to treasure troves of information that we want, and we have basically near immunity from any repercussions because we're not doing any censoring. We're not doing any limitations on your constitutional rights. No, Twitter is. They've successfully privately outsourced everything. Meanwhile, as you'll see, there are just dozens of employees that have made their way, meandered over from the private industry, or from the public industry called the FBI, over to Twitter. In fact, this article came out from the New York Post, published December 17th. They write that Twitter's top ranks are riddled with ex-FBI employees. It writes, Twitter's top ranks were riddled with these executives, stitching the company even closer to the federal agency that's now under fire. They write more than a dozen former feds flocked to the company in the months after after James Baker. This website's annoying. The Post found FBI influence was considerably more significant than just James Baker, the FBI's former general counsel who later worked in the same role for Twitter. He was recently fired because he's a liar, allegedly, for interfering in the billionaire's efforts to come clean. The news comes on the heels of the latest Twitter files and their disclosures. We've got some former government men and women who have been involved in company leadership at Twitter for a long time. This is James Baker. We've covered this guy at length. He, in my opinion, was as corrupt as you can be at the FBI when he was meeting with Michael Sussman and covering that whole saga up. Now he went over to Twitter. Matthew Williams is another one. He spent more than 15 years, worked mostly out of Seattle. He served as an intelligence program manager. Williams joined Twitter June 2020, the same month as Baker. He came on as a senior director of product trust. Okay. In June, he moved to a more expansive position. Twitter staff before the Musk takeover were famously liberal. 99% of campaign donations. This is Matthew Williams. Another person named Dawn Burton, former federal prosecutor. She joined Twitter 2019. Burton was a Comey insider. She had close contacts with agents who were involved in the Hillary email scandal. There were more people. She also donated to Democrats. Jeff Carlton worked for the FBI and the CIA. He was an intelligence officer for the Marines. His now deleted LinkedIn, because he's covering his tracks, says he was at the Twitter Strategic Response Team. Yeah, great. Also worked at Trust and Safety, donated to Democrats. Yoel Roth also is now disgraced, which is true, and he's also out of the company. All right, so all of these individuals, it's just an incestuous relationship between both entities, and it's very inappropriate, obviously, given the extent of what they have done to cover all of this up. And so we're going to go back to the Twitter files as soon as we hear from our friends over at 4Patriots, because it's that time of year where you're running out of ideas for Christmas gifts. Oh, that's not what I was looking for. This is what we're looking for. That was the chef image. So this is what I don't actually cook this food, but this is from Sleepy Dog Lee, our friend Paul Minot. This is from our friends over at 4Patriots. And as soon as we're done here, we're getting back to the Twitter supplemental files. My friends, a food shortage could be coming. Even in the United States, experts have written about this as recently as July. Drought, inflation, even new policies are pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important now than ever. And you can create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4Patriot survival food kits ever. This is not ordinary food. We're talking about good for 25 years super survival food, hand-packed right in family-owned facilities in the United States, giving jobs to over 200 Americans. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water-resistant, and they stack easily. They have different delicious breakfast, lunches, and dinners, and you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com. Use code Robert to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including this 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. They're called 4Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Go to 4patriots.com. Use code Robert to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com. Use code Robert. Start building your own stockpile today. Today, that's right. Nobody wants to starve to death out there in this brave new world that we're living in. And so head on over to 4Patriots And thank you for supporting our sponsors. Okay, so let's get back to the Twitter files now, the supplement. Now that we know that the FBI is infested with Twitter employees, now that we've seen what Elvis Chan has been communicating about, interfacing, giving classified briefings, he's been communicating direct information about national security problems to Twitter employees. Let's go back to the Twitter files. Here, we see, if we do a quick refresh, that Taibbi continues. He tells us that the task force demanded to know how Twitter came to its unpopular conclusion. Oddly, the bibliography was trying to provide some additional sources since nobody believed the FBI. But Roth got those questions in this email, and he says, that's interesting. I'm very curious. He says, receiving the questions, he says, I'm frankly perplexed by the requests here, which seem like something we'd get from a congressional committee than the Bureau. Roth responds, and in this letter, it says it's privileged and confidential. It says, hi, team. The questions we received are attached. I'm frankly perplexed by the requests here, which seem like more like something we'd get from a congressional committee rather than the Bureau. There's a big discussion to be had about state-controlled media, which will be impacted by the label launch later this month. But I'm not particularly comfortable with the Bureau, and by extension the intelligence community, demanding written answers here. What's your perspective on how best to navigate? All right, so the FBI sends over some exact demands, right? And that's exactly what we saw them as. And Yoel Roth also considers them to be demands, right? He says, yeah, they are demands. And in fact, Yoel's dead right on this. If Yoel had stayed with this position, I think a lot more people would be appreciative of his efforts. But he buckled and he gave in and he started to become one of the insiders. But here he is, being honest, he's complaining about a potential of state-controlled media, which is exactly what Twitter became. You can see a dangerous development there. But Taibbi continues. He says that Yoel says he was not comfortable with the Bureau and by extension, the IC, the intelligence community, demanding written answers. The idea of the FBI acting as a conduit for the IC is interesting, given that many agencies are barred from domestic operations. So Yoel sends another note internally. He says that the premise of the questions were flawed because we've been clear that the official state propaganda is definitely a thing on Twitter, but he adds some italics. So Yoel sends another one to the rest of his team after getting sort of scolded by the FBI. Yoel says, one other follow-up, Twitter team, in rereading this document that came from the FBI, the entire premise seems flawed. In our June 2020 briefing, we did not indicate that we, quote, had observed much recent activity. We didn't say that we had not observed much recent activity from official propaganda actors on your platform. We didn't say that, he says. I re-reviewed my notes from that briefing, and there's a specific item calling out official propaganda outlets as a major factor. And in multiple follow-ups with Elvis, we've been clear that the official state propaganda is definitely a thing on Twitter, right? And you know how he talks, so just use your best Yoel Roth voice. But that it's different in terms of how we handle it than the clandestine fake accounts. Yoel says, my recommendation is to get on the phone with Elvis ASAP and try to straighten this out. I'm concerned that there's a swirl somewhere in the IC about a statement that may have been fundamentally misunderstood. Blank, so-and-so, John, would you be okay with me reaching out to Elvis today to try to do that in advance of more formally engaging with the doc they sent? Okay, so Yoel totally buckles. Now he's sort of freaked out now at this point. Oh my gosh, do we offend the FBI? You send that text message to somebody, you're like, I think they'll get this joke, and you send it, and they're like, no response. Like, I don't think they got it. All right, what should I do? And you have to paper over it. So in his first response, he says, why are they asking us about this? In the second response, he says, actually, we're doing everything that they've already wanted already. In fact, it is a big thing, and we agree with you entirely. So we don't need to answer those other bullet points. Can we just call Elvis back? This is the problem, okay? If you disagree with the government, they send you a letter like that. So now what do they do at Twitter? They just reverse course. Oh yeah, that's right. The FBI's dead. Oh, that's right. State propaganda. Totally. Definitely a thing now. You can see this working in real time, right? It just flipped this dude's switch like that. It's definitely a thing. He even put it in italics. That's how animated he is over this. So now everything gets reversed. They're going to be engaging, cooperating with the FBI. Roth suggested, let's get on the phone ASAP. This exchange, says Matt, is odd, among other things, because some of the bibliography materials cited by the FITIF, the Election Integrity Loserville team, they're sourced to intelligence officials who in turn cited to public sources. So you get this old sort of this death spiral of sources. And they're very good at this. This is exactly what they did with Michael Sussman and the FBI. They took Michael Sussman. They said, go to the FBI, deliver the Trump PP tape story to Jim Baker. He's one of ours. He's there at the FBI. Jim Baker took it. Then Sussman went over to the Washington Post or the other media entities and told them, FBI's investigating. You guys better look into this too, right? It's like self-referencing links. But if you have enough of them, you just keep going in a big circle and around we go. The FBI responded to Friday's report last week, the one that we read here, by saying this. According to John Nicosia, the FBI responds to Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi said, you guys are a bunch of liars and losers last week on Friday. All of that's true, of course. So the FBI responded and they said, excuse me, Matt. The FBI regularly engages with private sector entities to provide information specific to identified foreign malign influence actors' subversive, undeclared, covert, or criminal activities. All right, that came right out of the FBI. You know how that came out of the FBI? Because we just read it. You can see it. Private sector entities independently make decisions about it. All right, so just a bizarre statement. Identified foreign malign influence actors is subversive, undeclared, covert, or criminal activities. What a bunch. That's a typical FBI statement. One of the worst statements you've ever seen crafted. Of course, it came out of there. Not a surprise. All right. So Matt says whatever that sentence means. He says whatever. That may be true. In other words, that they do communicate and provide a lot of information to a lot of people. He says, but we haven't seen those documents to date. I mean, if they're saying that's true, we haven't seen it. Instead, we've mostly seen requests for moderation involve low follower accounts belonging to ordinary Americans and somebody named Billy Baldwin. So in other words, all of this foreign malign influences actors, subversive, undeclared, covert criminal activities? No, it wasn't that at all. You dorks at the FBI. It was about people making jokes about voting on Wednesday. Gosh, you guys are crazy, man. Okay, if you say so. All right, it's like a role play over there. So that's the end of it for Matt Taibbi. He says, okay, Billy Baldwin is the other person who they harassed, along with a couple of other accounts like James Woods and Kayleigh McEnany. Yeah, those very, very malign foreign actors, that everybody was pointing out and Twitter had to nuke. So that's the supplemental file. And of course, there's a lot more where that comes from, but he throws it over, Matt Taibbi throws it over to Twitter Files 7.